My name is Bruce Ellis. I brought in a model 1895 Winchester Lee Navy rifle. It was in the arms locker of the USS Maine when it blew up, and it was recovered sometime after the explosion, and I got it at auction.
The Spanish-American War helped establish the US's vision of itself as a defender of democracy. In 1895, President William McKinley sent the USS Maine to Havana Harbor to protect American interests as the Cubans fought for independence from Spain. A mysterious explosion destroyed the American battleship and killed most of its crew. The precise cause has never been proven, but it led to the US and Spain declaring war on each other. It was a lopsided 16-week conflict that spilled over into the Pacific. When Spain surrendered, it ceded ownership of Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippine Islands to the US. Cuba gained its independence, but the US was granted a permanent naval base at Guantanamo Bay.
Welcome, Bruce. Can you tell us what you brought in?
What I have is a relic from the USS Maine, which was an American battleship that was blown up, exploded in Havana Harbor in 1898. This fragment was dredged out of the harbor about 2 years later. The other piece we have is what it looked like before the explosion.
These are interesting firearms because they were designed for the U.S. Navy, and a small caliber bullet, .236 or 6mm Lee, and it was designed to penetrate armor and shoot longer ways from ship to ship sort of action. And it used a cam type of pullback action. And it pulls back to that and cams upwards and loads the shells, and then you load forward, lock it in, and away you went. Bruce, what else can you tell us about the explosion?
Initially, in the press, it was a mine, that is the stationary explosive device under the water, a torpedo fired from another ship. There was some speculation that to provoke the U.S. into military action, that the Cuban insurreccionados, the rebels, planted a bomb in the magazine. That's extremely tenuous. And best forensic case is that, remember, it was a coal-powered ship. The grade of coal used was not the best. Also, you're in a damp climate, you're going to get venting problems, as you do in any ship or any boat. And it built up methane, and it doesn't take much to set that off. And that's most probably, given the violence of the explosion and the physical location of the explosion, what happened.
Yeah. In 1911, they got the funds to clear the harbor of the wreckage, and they put a cofferdam around the ship and drained it out and recovered remains of sailors that were left aboard. There was, I believe, 298 sailors perished in that explosion.
Yeah, that's about 2/3 of the crew.
2/3 of the crew, exactly. And I assume that's when this was recovered, when they did that, and a bunch of artifacts, and they floated the hull and sailed out to sea and sunk it. Of interest, the crow's nest and mast off that ship is in Arlington Cemetery. Bruce, what can you tell us about the cross here?
That's a grave marker for veterans of the Spanish-American War. And this just notes the various theaters.
What can you tell us about the Spanish-American War?
Well, initially, there was a series of small revolts in Cuba by Cubaneros objecting to Spanish rule. Now, most Americans could care less about what's going on in Cuba, but the newspapers, who were attracted to anything that bleeds,
yes,
took it as good press. And indeed, it was. The U.S. was just getting over the post-Civil War slump. In fact, a lot of the Civil War ironclads were still on coastal patrol, and they needed coal imports if they were going to become an effective naval power.
There was an interest in the United States to obtain certain possessions that Spain had for coaling stations in the Pacific and around the territorial Caribbean. So when it exploded in Havana Harbor, it was used as a catalyst to push towards war with Spain. And there was a familiar cry at the time, a rally, like Remember the Alamos, Remember the Maine. Well, Bruce, most Canadians aren't very familiar with the Spanish-American War, but I understand there was a couple of Nova Scotians that went down and fought in that war, and can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that would be the Mellor brothers from what we now call the Maitland area. I believe they were both on the USS Nebraska off Cuba. There was a requirement to cut some Spanish communication cables, and they went out in a small boat, both the boys, and did that while taking fire from the Spanish. And for that, they were both awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. This happens very infrequently in terms of brothers, and they both, as far as I can tell from the after-action report, really earned it.
Well, Bruce, the war never lasted that long, but it took place in a tropical climate. You know, what was the effect of that on the health of the soldiers?
Oh, you lost far more through malaria, yellow fever, and certainly the climate, which most soldiers weren't climated to at that time. Food went bad real quick. Dysentery is a great leveler of any army.
Yes.
So your losses were perhaps 1/3 in combat, but 2/3 to health problems.
Well, Bruce, this is quite an amazing artifact here. You don't see something off the Maine every day. What do you plan to do with these items?
Well, you know, you never see a U-Haul behind a hearse.
That's
so
true.
I hope that this will go to someone who appreciates it.
Mm-hmm.
At my age, you start to think about stuff like that.
Thank you again for bringing it in.
My pleasure. It doesn't matter if it's a musket or a sword or a World War I rum jug or a grandfather's medals. They're all physical touchstones of an experience.